Welcome to Jubilee 2025 Pilgrims of Hope, a podcast from the Catholic Courier celebrating this milestone year in the Universal Church with stories of faith and hope from around the Diocese of Rochester. Here's your host, Gina Capellazzi, digital content producer at the Catholic Courier.
During the month of February, for the Jubilee year, there will be celebrations for armed forces, police, and security officers, along with artists and deacons. Deacon Ed Giblin represents two of these groups. Deacon Giblin is the director of the Office of Permanent Diaconate and the Diocesan Director of Communications for the Diocese of Rochester. He has also served as a parish deacon at Our Mother of Sorrows in Greece and Holy Cross Church in Rochester. But Deacon Ed Giblin also served more than 20 years with the Rochester Police Department, retiring as a commanding officer of the Special Investigations Section. He also worked in public safety at SUNY Brockport. So we couldn't think of a better person to highlight, representing two of the groups of the faithful receiving special recognition this month. Deacon Ed Giblin joined Catholic Courier staff writer Mike Latona recently to talk about both his vocations. Part of their conversation took place in the Catholic Courier studio, and the other part was outside Deacon Giblin's former police station on Child Street on Rochester's west side. So I'll turn things over now to Mike.
Thank you, Gina, and thank you, Deacon Ed, for being here today.
My pleasure.
So I'd like to start out by asking you a little about your Catholic schooling background, and as a jumping off point, in our own personal conversations, we often bring up your alma mater, Seton Hall, and my alma mater, Syracuse, as far as basketball circles go. And then when I was preparing for this today, I thought it would be interesting to explore a little about the fact that you went to a Catholic college and whether there was a connection with Catholic education prior to that as well. And maybe you could give me a little sketch of your Catholic schooling history, if you will.
Sure. Catholic grammar school all the way through 8th grade, St. Cashin School in Montclair, New Jersey. Followed up by Seton Hall Prep, which at the time was on the campus of Seton Hall University in South Orange. And then on to the big prep, we called it, Seton Hall University. And following that with St. Bernard's School of Theology and Ministry. So in my entire educational history, I've been in classrooms with crucifixes, and it's been a very positive experience. Good to be steeped in the faith, where the faith is reinforced. Seton Hall University had a huge priest community at the time, and literally you could go to confession walking across the campus between classes in daily mass and things like that. So from my earliest upbringing, fostered, of course, by my parents who made the sacrifices to make it happen, it's been a great education in Catholic institutions.
How did you end up here in Rochester?
Married a girl from here. Actually went to Seton Hall Prep and University with her cousin, and we came up once, I should shamedly admit probably, for the Oktoberfest at the Hofbrau House on Lyle Avenue, and met my dear wife then, and the romance began. And after a long distance courtship, when we were married, we settled here.
It looks like you started studying for the diaconate about 10 years, I'd say, into your career with the Rochester Police Department. Would that be right?
Yes, yep, right about that time. I started in 1995, and I was appointed to the police department in 1985, 40 years ago. So
certainly police work can be grueling, and diaconal work, ministry, has its own share of many responsibilities. How did you come to the decision that you wanted to pursue the diaconate?
I think, as any Catholic young man at the time, from grammar school on, a vocation to the priesthood at the time, because the diaconate hadn't been restored yet, was always in people's minds. The Sarah Club used to come every year to speak in the classrooms to people, and I had good witnesses and good role models in the parish priests that I had, the priests at Seton Hall, both at the prep and the university. So I discerned, like a lot of other young guys, priesthood, and decided that was not for me. But afterwards, when the diaconate was restored, and I had no example of it in Jersey, there weren't any deacons in my parish when I was growing up. Believe it or not, my first exposure to deacons was here in the Diocese of Rochester, and it was Deacon Ange Kosha, who has since returned to the Lord, and Deacon Pat Shanley, who were at Holy Family Church on Ames Street, 2 blocks from where I worked at the police department. So I would regularly go to Mass there, and that was my exposure to those two guys and diaconal ministry. And that kind of spurred the interest after conversations with them.
Now, your parish assignments have been Holy Cross in Charlotte and Our Mother of Sorrows in Greece. Is that
Yes,
correct?
they were my two assignments. I was 13 years at Holy Cross with Father Wieland and 4 years at Mother of Sorrows with Father Tommaso and Father Coffis, and then this job here.
I know you could probably come up with many examples, but could you give me a little thumbnail sketch of what your experience has been like in parish diaconal ministry?
Parish ministry has been wonderful because you're with people in all kinds of experiences and times. My spiritual director, right before I was ordained, said, the Lord will put you in places you never thought you would be. And I found that true in parish ministry especially. Celebrating high times with people, baptisms, first communions, and weddings, and sad times as well. Funerals, illnesses, being summoned to the bedside of parishioners who are dying, who asked for you specifically because of the relationships that you had formed in the parish. So my spiritual director was right. It was a great spectrum of experience in parish ministry, highs and lows, being with the people where they're at, and witnessing their fidelity to their faith and their love and affection for their parishes and their tremendous spirit of volunteerism. I mean, the folks at Holy Cross and Mother Sorrows are legendary for that. A very involved, parishioner base and great ministries that are going on then and still now.
If I have my timetable correct, you became the diocesan director of deacons about the same time you retired from the public safety at SUNY Brockport. Am I right?
Yep. After 32 years of police work, I was I retired from that after 32 years, and I was actually just looking for a part-time job in parish ministry, perhaps as a pastoral associate. At the time this position was vacant, I was asked to send in my resume, and I was interviewed by the bishop, and the Lord writing straight with crooked lines, here I am. So,
you must, I know you've always thought so highly of your brother deacons, and you must have really had that heightened even more, the relationships because of your position as director. Maybe you could talk a little about your connections with all the deacons in the diocese. It's a big and sacred responsibility, I would think.
Right, and it's a humbling responsibility. And from this chair, I see now a broader picture and a broader swath of what the deacons and their wives do in ministry around the diocese. I had a parochial view of Monroe County when I was assigned here, but now that I see what people do in the 12 counties of the diocese, the tremendous ministries that they do, hospital ministry, campus chaplaincy, campus ministry, ministry to the sick, homeless outreach, St. Vincent de Paul, legal assistance, just a wide spectrum of things that they do. It is humbling to see what they do so generously, deacons and their wives, with the experience they bring from the secular world to their ministry, and the benefit that they are to the parishes and the pastors. I get tremendous feedback from the pastors about the work that the deacons do in the parishes, and that's always very gratifying.
Was it about 2 years ago that you also became diocesan director of communications?
Yes, when Doug Mandalero retired, the bishop asked me to take on that role of diocesan director of communications, so I've got that. I also coordinate the jail and prison ministry for the diocese, the healthcare ministry for the diocese, and other special tasks as assigned by the bishop, as most job descriptions would say.
Other than that, you have very little going on.
No. But I find it it's like I said, it's a gratifying ministry, and I'm just trying to do the best I can to serve the Church of Rochester, and especially my brother deacons and their wives to be a good servant to the community.
As you're saying all that, it crosses my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe you're twice retired from police work. Am I right?
Yes, 25 years with the Rochester Police Department and 7 at Brockport. So 32 years altogether in police work.
Quite a retirement you're having.
Yeah.
I don't see you watching TV or going to Aruba very much here.
No, it keeps me busy, but it's good. It's we're all called to be servants and to witness the servant Christ, and I'm honored and privileged and humbled to be able to do it in this position that I have here.
You seem to just naturally rise up whatever the position you're in, whether it be police work or diaconal work or diocesan ministry, in administration, your directorships, sergeant, I believe, when you were the director of public safety, director of communications, director of deacons. Maybe you could talk a little about how you approach those kinds of positions, how you get into those kinds of positions.
Again, you start at the ground level. In the police department, I started as a patrolman, and when I retired, I was a captain of the police department at the time. And it's just your experience, your training, the support of other people, mentors that help you along the way. So as you advance in the police department with different responsibilities, different obligations, it gives you a broader picture of the organization. I had patrol assignments, investigative assignments, administrative assignments, and I learned the good and the bad of all of those. And like I said, I had wonderful mentors and a support system. Similarly, when I went to SUNY Brockport, it was different. Campus policing was different than urban policing, but it was a good experience. And in the diaconate, the same thing. Like I said, I've talked about pastors I've had. My first experience was with Father Wheeland, and he had never had a deacon. He was ordained, I think, 35 years, had never been in a parish with a deacon. So we kind of learned together, and I learned a tremendous amount from him. He was a really good guy, very pastoral, taught me a lot. I had the same experience with Father Tommaso and Father Coffis, good men that supported my diaconal ministry, taught me a lot about parish ministry. And of course, the support of my wife and my family, because it's a lot of time away. The police department was a lot of time away. Nights and weekends and holidays for many years, missed a lot of things. And in diaconal ministry, with parish assignments, you're gone weekends and holidays and things like that, although the phone doesn't ring at 2 or 3 in the morning anymore like it used to be when I was a police captain.
And here at the diocese, you have dual leadership roles now. I would imagine, you mentioned your pastors in the parishes, that you also have a good working relationship with Bishop Matano. Not that I'm trying to put words in your mouth.
No, of course, yeah. The bishop is very supportive of me personally, professionally, of my ministry, and of the diaconal ministry in the diocese. He's always very concerned about the deacons and their wives and their families. And the guys say the bishop is always saying your marriage is your first obligation, and he's right. That's our first vocation, and he's very supportive in that way. So, and he's in tune with. He knows what's going on with the deacons, and knows a lot about the deacons and their families and their ministry, and that's very helpful to me.
I was looking it up this June, silver anniversary.
Yes, 25 years for me, yeah.
How does that sound, 25 years as a deacon?
Just makes me sound like I'm an old man. No, it's been, like I said, it's been a great ride. It's been a great ride. The 25 years I've seen and experienced many different things that have been a grace in my life. There have been some challenges, some joys, but it's, again, going back to my upbringing, how my parents raised me, how I was raised in the faith through education, do the best with what you've been given. Everybody's been given different graces and talents, and to share with the community, and I've tried to do the best that I can with that. Understanding, that's what my folks kind of inbred in me, and the good religious sisters. I was taught by the Sisters of St. Dominic in New Jersey, and it just kind of magnifies, and if you let it percolate a little bit, it comes to fruition.
We'll be right back with more of our interview with Deacon Ed Giblin. Get the news in your inbox when you sign up for Catholic Courier e-newsletters. Stay up to date on Jubilee year 2025 and all the other news and events from the Diocese of Rochester with Monday e-news, Thursday weekend, and Saturday reflection emails. To sign up, email us at latestnews@catholiccourier.com. Now we return to part 2 of our interview with Deacon Ed Giblin. Deacon Giblin and Mike are outside Deacon Giblin's former police station on Child Street on Rochester's west side.
So Deacon Ed, this is where it all began for you, huh?
This is it, Maple Section, 1985. I came here 40 years ago as a patrolman, newly appointed to the police department.
You had different stops, usually around the west side of the city, but this was your first stop. Maybe you could kind of take me through the whole odyssey of your career with the Rochester Police Department.
Sure. I started here as a patrolman in 1985, and I was here for several years. I left to be a recruit class counselor. From that position, I was promoted to sergeant. I did a brief stint over in Highland Section on the east side. Came back here as a lieutenant. And was very glad to be back on the west side. Spent my time here as a lieutenant. Went into the Vice Squad, Special Investigations, as a lieutenant. I stayed there for a while. Was promoted to captain. I was commanding officer of the Genesee Section, which is the precinct at Bull's Head. I was the captain of Genesee Section for several years. Then I went back to the Vice Squad as the captain and commanding officer. and that's where I retired from.
We talked a little earlier about how you were actually an English major at Seton Hall University. How did you morph over into police work? I wouldn't have necessarily connected the two.
Well, when I was an English major, I had law school on my mind at the time at Seton Hall. And that didn't happen. I was always interested in police work. My dad was a cop for 41 years. So police work was always, high on my list of things to do. Always aspired to a career there. Actually, I put myself through college as a firefighter. I was a fireman in my hometown. And when I moved to Rochester, I took both tests, the city fire exam and the city police exam. I scored high on both, but the police called me first, and that's how it happened. That's how it went. So,
what are the qualities of somebody who gets into police work? What are good qualities to have?
Well, we want people, obviously young people of ability, integrity, to be police officers, to serve the community. We're looking for people that use common sense, are people-oriented, and get along with people. Obviously, it's a high-stress job, so we want people that can adjust to that, make decisions on the fly quickly, which you're put into, but understand human nature and being with folks, being a people person. As I said, common sense, ability, integrity, hard work ethic, because it's a hard job. That's the kind of stuff you're looking for.
This is a tough question, but do you feel that police as a whole sometimes get a little misunderstood, or whatever you want to call it, because you may have one bad cop, so to speak, that makes the headlines?
Well, sure. I mean, obviously the police department has actors that act out of the highest integrity of the police service and cause problems. It happens in all professions, lawyers and doctors, the clergy, sadly. But, people get a bad rap on the police. You think of it, most of the time the police are called to a situation, nobody's happy. One side is mad at the other side's been hit by a car, whatever. You typically don't get called to situations where people are happy. So you're going to leave the situation with somebody unhappy. And, the police, I think, bear the brunt of that. I think there's a lot more emphasis now, thankfully, than when I came on the job for officer wellness, and to be able to separate the two. Psychological, physical, spiritual wellness and health, much more in the minds of today's police officers, not to bring it home. To kind of separate it and not let what you see and hear on the job, which can be sad and challenging, impinge on your family life and your personal life. So I think the department, to their credit, has made great strides in working on officer wellness and health. The officers of today face a whole different social scene than I did. They have benefits of technology and more science behind them, but it's still a people job, and it's still a job that puts you in sad situations and violent situations.
A little more about your police work in the city here and the fact that you're also a Catholic deacon. I just find such an interesting dynamic, because you're in tough situations. You may have to be tough in order to maintain control and apprehend people. How do you wed it all together? Jesus welcomes the sinner, and yet you're dealing with people who, I don't know if we call them bad people, but they're doing bad things. How do you piece that all together?
Well, there's a way to do it. If you do it legally and respectfully, it can be done. Police work, the optics aren't always very good when you're wrestling with somebody, but if you pay attention to the rules and regulations of the department, you pay attention to the law, you can make arrests of very bad people, and bring them before justice in an effective way. There's really no contradiction. We're called to serve one another, and police officers are guardians. They protect the innocent and the weak and the vulnerable. So that's our job. And you hear it's kind of trite to say, but they stand the line between good and evil. And again, I'm thankful that good young men and women of character and ability are still stepping forward to do it. And from a lens of faith, it's just you do recognize the image of God in everybody else, good and bad alike. And you just let that inform your decision making, that you can do this job, you can do it the right way, you can do it honorably and with integrity and with courage, and be a proud member of the police department and a benefit to the community.
As a minister, a Catholic minister, do you also or have you been able in some way, shape, or form to apply ministry to the people you apprehend, even if it's a couple of seconds of, look, maybe you want to straighten your life around?
I can't think of any particular incident. My dad always told me, and he was, like I said, he was a policeman for 41 years, that, a word to the wise doesn't cost you anything, and it can do a good deal. It may do, be a great benefit to the person that hears it. So, an occasional word to the wise to somebody, and, particularly an errant youth, who's going down the wrong path, to straighten up. And as I said, if you treat them with respect and they understand you have a job to do, sometimes a word to the wise can help, I think. I can't think of any particular instances when it did, but, I wouldn't discount it. And I would encourage officers to do that. To just, a kind word and some guidance, may bear good fruit.
You're really a steward of the community, aren't you?
Yes, yep. You're called from the community to serve the community, much like the diaconate, much like ministry. The community entrusts you with power, the power of the badge to enforce the law. You have power to use physical force to enforce the law, up to and including the use of deadly physical force, which is a tremendous responsibility, an awesome responsibility, and an obligation to do it the right way, the best way you can.
You've had a lot of years to draw from. Do any days stand out as your worst days, and do any days stand out as your best days?
Worst days, I can remember certain crime scenes, particularly homicides, that you'll never lose. They're kind of ingrained in your mind. And one wasn't far from here; it was several blocks away. It was a double homicide of a father and his young son, and I was the first car there at the time, and I haven't lost that image in my mind. But as you go through the neighborhoods, I can drive through the west side here or in Genesee section where I served, and think of violent scenes and murders and sad days for the police department and for the community. Happy days. There were a lot more happy days than sad days, and a lot of it as I rose through the ranks was as a supervisor and hopefully as a leader or a role model, seeing the young officers that I worked with do great things. And I worked with a ton of young officers, men and women that that made rescues, that saved people, that saved lives, and those are the kind of things that are the best things that stand out is what they do, what the young men and women that serve the police department do.
I'm thinking back especially to the time you were ordained. Would there be people from the diocese, say, who would have a hard time fathoming you in a police outfit? And would there be people from the police department who would have a hard time fathoming you in your deacon stole and whatnot?
I don't think so. I think I had a lot of support. I was obviously working on the police department when I was in formation. Had a lot of support there, from bosses and people that understood, what I was about. I mentioned the other day that my first exposure to the diaconate really was 2 blocks down this way at Holy Family Church with Deacon Ed Giblin of happy memory. He's returned to the Lord, and Deacon Pat Shanley. When I was working here, I would go to Mass at Holy Family, and I saw them. So I don't think it was a big surprise for the police officers to see me step into ministry. We had a good number of officers on the job who were active in their faith communities. Deputy Chief Sammy Drayton was an ordained minister at the time. Will Johnson, who was a Rochester police captain, worked with me in Genesee section, was ordained after me and serves. Bill Finnerty is a pastor in Child area. So a lot of good people of faith that worked the job, I don't think were surprised. As far as people at the diocese realizing I had been a cop, I don't think so. I think they realize it's a job to do, and it's been good. It's been good both ways.
Well, thanks, Deacon Ed, for your time here and earlier at the diocese and standing outside today. You've been very cooperative, and you're well deserving of this attention. And congratulations on your 25 years as a permanent deacon.
Thanks very much. Always my pleasure. My pleasure, and pleasure to recognize. I get the ability to speak about the diaconate and police work here for this Jubilee podcast, but just recognize, prayerfully recognizing gratitude and ask St. Michael's protection for the officers that work today, and St. Lawrence's intercession for the deacons of today.
You can learn more about the Jubilee year by clicking on the links in the description below this video. Or if you're just listening to us, the links are in the description below your podcast player. We'll have another episode for you on March 20th. Thank you for joining us for Jubilee 2025 Pilgrims of Hope podcast.